First, Angie, do we have quorum for both? We do, okay. I think there's only one item on there.
Be the city engineer at the city of Sunnyvale.
Okay, so if we could have a roll call.
City engineer at the city of Sunnyvale, that's how I know her.
Chairs Constantine,
That's the city
Here.
engineer.
Lazat,
Here. Yeah.
Board members Harney,
Present.
Calnan,
Here.
Tucker,
Here.
Wasserman,
Here.
Tate, Keegan,
Here.
Rocha,
Here.
Carmen,
Here.
Semidian.
Here. All right, thank you Supervisor Semidian for joining us on the phone. Reports of chairs. I just came back from Hawaii, so I want you all to gloat. I'm gloating right now, yes. So I actually do not have a report. Just came in yesterday. So I also have a cold, so I will not be shaking anyone's hand or hugging. I'll be doing the fist pump. I won't cough on you, Linda. And then I will ask, cut it out. And then I will ask Chair Lazat if she has a report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a report, but please don't sneeze on me because on Saturday I'm going on a first vacation in 4 or 5 years. So keep your distance, please. Thank you.
4 or 5 years, that's...
Well, for any length of time, you know, weekend here, weekend there, I don't call a vacation, so.
All right, so there you go.
Take it away.
All right, and then we'll have a report from the Public Advisory Commission, Mr. Walt Blinds. And I don't know, where do we have?
He's here.
He's here, but I don't know, which mic are we going to use? That one? Okay, perfect. Yes. Yes, you guessed correctly.
Thank you. Walt Glines, I'm on the Public Advisory Committee. A real brief report. Last week in Morgan Hill, there was a meeting by the Water District to talk about the work that's going to be going on up at Anderson Dam. And there was a little discussion about the high-speed rail. And apparently the high-speed rail and the Water District have had little or no interaction about what's going to be going on. And I want to make sure that you folks, I know that you folks have been in the loop to a certain, to even more so degree. But if that's not happening, that definitely needs to happen. And because that work is not too far off. And they're talking about closing roads up there for 5 years, and I'm not sure how people who live up there, and maybe it was discussed, but I wasn't there, this is just a secondhand report, are worried about what's going to happen to them, because this was the first that they were finding out as well.
Okay.
May I make a comment?
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair? Are we on? We're on?
Testing 1, 2.
I don't have
You're
It's
on. You're hot.
Okay. Thank you, Walt. I just wanted to let you know in response to what you said, the cities of Morgan Hill and Gilroy have been having their meetings with high-speed rail, doing environmental impact reports. The county's been meeting. We've held 4 or 5 meetings, community meetings with high-speed rail, did an environmental impact report, and last week the county made its recommendations at a public meeting. Those are going forward. The cities of Morgan Hill doing their own, and part of the county's was input, where's Edmund, was from the HCA. They added to our own staff's information regarding the EIR. But the Water District, I can't speak to, but I know we have a member here of that. Thank you.
Well, speaking about closing roads, I'm sure that the Water District is going to continue to be in contact with the people in the community and make sure that they have access to their properties. Stay tuned.
Okay, any more comments on that? Okay, we'll move on to public comment. These public comment is for items not on this agenda. If there's anybody in the audience wishing to make public comment, I see no one rushing up. Okay, well, then we'll move on. This is a joint meeting of the Governing and Implementation Board, and we have 5 items for the joint meeting. And the first item will be the approval of the minutes of March 16th, 2017, the special regular. Yes.
Thank you. I'd make a motion we put items 1 and 3, a motion to approve 1 and 3.
Second.
It's, omitting number 2? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, there's a motion for items 1 and 3, and there was a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Smithian. Any opposed?
Actually, I can't approve number 1 because I wasn't present at that meeting.
Okay, that you can abstain if you'd like.
Wouldn't it be better to separate them so I could abstain from number?
I can mention that you're abstaining from number 1. That's
Okay.
fine, we can do
All
that.
right.
Okay, so Ms. Keegan is going to abstain from item number 1?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, moving on to item number 2, which is the Executive Officer Employment Agreement Extension. And I believe Ms. Armental is going to be making the, my cold, is going to be making
Thank you. So this item is really a discussion item. There's no request for action at this time. But the implementation board in May indicated that it was interested, since Mr. Sullivan's contract expires at the end of June, in extending his contract or negotiating a revised contract for a several-year term. And the timing of when the implementation board meets and when the governing board meets and when the governing board approves its budget makes it somewhat awkward and difficult for the implementation board to enter into any sort of negotiations without knowing some of the parameters that it might have from a financial perspective. The way the two boards are set up, the governing board has the focus on the money, and the implementation board actually has the responsibility for the hiring and working terms and so forth. So the implementation board is looking for a little bit of direction from the governing board, particularly with the first year of the contract, because in subsequent years, the contract itself would indicate what the parameters would be, and that would be included in any budget review that came before both bodies. But right now, the implementation board would like to have some concept from the governing board as to where they might be able to go with overall financial aspects. And any member of the implementation board is free to chime in as to if I have mischaracterized what their interest is.
Supervisor Wassman?
Thank you, Chair. Valerie, since the governing board needs to discuss the compensation first, then the implementation board can discuss details such as length of term. On our
Correct.
calendar today, we have Section 1, which is implementation board and governing board, Section 2, which is governing board only, and Section 3, which is implementation board only. So what do you recommend we do? My interest is extending, as one member, is extending the term of the contract so that we're talking 2 or 3 years at a time instead of getting into this conundrum every year.
Right. Well, actually, you're not getting into you haven't been getting into the conundrum every year. Currently, it's a 3-year contract. It's just that you're coming to the end of the 3rd year. And so my understanding from the May meeting was that the implementation board would like some sense from the governing board, whether it's a global dollar amount or it's a percentage increase range above what you currently have. The contract, the last time around, the contract was for 3 years. It specified in the contract what the terms were for each year in terms of there could be a merit increase of a certain percentage range, there could be a salary increase within a certain percentage or a certain level. The other monetary aspects of the contract don't change very much. And so I think what the governing board needs to advise the implementation board is, okay, we would be comfortable with an increase not to exceed X type of thing.
This is for budgeting purposes.
Yes, for budgeting purposes. So
Thank
the implementation board can then have an idea when it's negotiating what its parameters are.
Thank you.
Okay, any further comment? Go ahead.
Wasn't part of this that the budget covered, there was a 1 year missing of the budget or something like that? Or did I misinterpret what I read? Where we have everything budgeted and then we're going to have a new budget at some point in the future, but there's a 1 year.
Well, it's not a 1 year. It's so The governing board is likely to act on the budget for fiscal year 18-19 in the late spring, early summer of 18. So more or less May, June of 18. But the implementation board would like to have, as I understand it, Mr. Sullivan's contract figured out before then, so that it kicks in on July 1st as it should, and you don't have to worry about retroactive issues and everything else. So once that's done, if, as Mr. Wasserman indicated, it's a 2 or 3 year contract, then you wouldn't have these issues for the next 2 or 3 years, because that would be spelled out in the contract. So it's just for this kind of end of one, beginning of the next, that there's a little uncertainty for how much money there might be that would be considered appropriate by the governing board.
Does that answer your question?
No, that's what I thought it was too. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of an overlap.
A little bit confusing, but
Yeah.
So the way I understand it is the implementation board is asking for basically what the rate or the ranges would be for the merit increase, and we really don't know that until the budget is taken care of, correct?
Well, not just the merit increase, but the overall salary. So the contract has actually several components. It has what you would call a base salary, and then it has the ability to have sort of like brownie point increase.
And excuse me, that's currently 3 and 2, right?
Let me just double check. I have a copy of the contract here.
3% annual and then up to a 2% merit.
Yes, so the current contract called for a 3% increase for each of the past 2 fiscal years, and then a merit bonus of between 1% and 2%.
Then I think it would make, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone can go ahead and chime in, that it makes sense that if the governing board okayed a budget that would facilitate the minimum and the maximum range. That way the implementation board really doesn't have to worry about that. They can decide, make that decision based on what they feel is what's needed what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever the merit should be for that year, without worrying about the budget, because the governing board would have already budgeted for the highest amount.
Exactly.
So,
High end of the range.
right, that way they don't have to worry about it. So, does that seem?
So I would say then we would say no more than 5% total,
However it breaks down.
however
However
it
it
breaks
breaks
down
down.
for the budget.
Yeah.
So, members of the implementation board, do you have any problem with that? Does that solve the issue? Sort of, kind of?
You just need a number, right?
It's the implementation board that needs to be happy with what is being suggested. It doesn't matter to me.
So I'll ask members of the implementation board, and I will ask the chair of the implementation board to chime in on that.
So if I'm understanding, the direction that, or the suggestion is a maximum of 5, and we can split it up, either merit or salary range, except the merit is one time and the salary is cumulative.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the understanding that the governing board realizes that we'll take that into consideration. What would be, or does the governing board have any sense with regard to, again, is there any limitation on the salary range, since it would add on every year as opposed to a...
So this is for budget purposes? I just think they need a percentage, I don't know the way I understood it, they need some for future budgeting, and then when it comes to the contract, that's a different thing to discuss, right? It's just whether you want to say 5% is max or 2% is max, and It's kind of what you know.
So Board Member Tucker, when you said 5%, were you talking about just the merit, or were you also talking
Both.
about? You were talking about
Because
both.
we had already
Both.
said
Okay.
3% and 2%, so I was just saying for the next fiscal year, let's just say 5%. And
Because I
then,
think you just need a dollar amount for purposes of budgeting.
Right, exactly. So say a maximum of 5% for either the merit increase or pay.
combined.
And this is just for 1 year.
No, this would be for, okay, so the merit increases.
Three-year contract.
It's a 3-year contract, that's what I'm saying. If it's a 3-year contract, then for budgeting purposes, we need to know what the max is on the salary end, because that accumulates. A merit increase doesn't. It's a one-time payment. So there's a different impact on the budget. Am I correct?
That's correct. However,
Go ahead.
if you negotiate a contract that's more than 1 year, and you have parameters set out in that contract, then the budgets that are compiled and presented to the governing board to be voted on in the subsequent years
Take into
will take
consideration.
that
Okay.
into account.
I just wanted to be clear on that. Okay, that's fine, that's fine. Anybody else on the implementation board have any comments?
So is that clear? Is that clear?
Clear as mud?
What?
Yep.
You're good? Okay. Do you have enough direction?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Then we will go ahead and close that item and move on to item number 4, which is the final the final report for fiscal year 17 revenue and budget expenditures. And Ms. Moros is going to be giving that report, I believe? Okay, Mr. Sullivan, you're up.
Yes, and I will, I guess, so I know that a couple of our board members have a meeting in Los Gatos at 5, so I will move quickly in my 2 items here.
Luckily, from here to 17 is reverse commute, so there should be no problem till they get to 17.
Right, exactly.
We still have a closed session, though, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. So so item 4 is review and accept the revenue and expenditures for fiscal year 17, which was from July of 2016 to June of 2017. So I'll go over this quickly, and then if there's questions, I'll address the questions. So our final revenue total for fiscal year 17 was just under $4 million. It was $3,946,200. Of that, fees represented, so these are fees that projects pay, represented a little over 3.1 million of that. Our actual projected budget was for revenues was a little over 4.3 million. So the expenditures, which are on page 4, or excuse me, page 19, page 4 of this staff report, but page 19. The actual expenditures represented a 16.7% reduction in the projected budgeted expenditures. So our actual was $3,055,778, and the projected budget for 17, fiscal year 17, was $3,667,377. And as I stated, that was about 16, it was exactly 16.7, if you rounded it up, reduction in the actual budget. So by breaking it down in major categories, the main area where our expenditures was in conservation and restoration, which is kind of where we want it to be. It represented over half of the expenditures for fiscal year 11, or 17. And 772,000 of it was for wetland restoration and creation, and that was the Clara Pond and wetland restoration, construction, and the San Felipe Creek design phase represents the majority of that. We also had a couple smaller projects that contributed to that amount. land enrollment represents appraisals, and then you can see research and monitoring, that's related to species monitoring, the rare plants, the butterflies, and then burrowing owl has its own separate category.
Yes.
It's kind of our red alert warning species, unfortunately. And I guess for salary purposes, based on the previous item that Valerie was talking about, you can see what the EO salary was. That'll give you a little idea. And that includes my full compensation, car allowance, benefits, everything. So any questions? on the
Any
budget?
questions on the budget? No questions, and I believe it was just to discuss, so.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Looking at the agenda action as it's stated, and then going through the document, I'm trying to get a sense of the timing of this item before us and the purpose of it. You know, oftentimes these are more budget fiscal year and May, June
Yes.
as you're leading up to. The timing of this one, can you help me understand as a new person to this, why would this item would be in front of us today?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's the relevance to it?
So we collect fees on a quarterly basis, and we don't know what projects are coming in with the co-permittees, all of you that represent the cities and the two special districts. So we don't know what projects coming in, let's say, in the city of San Jose. For instance, we thought Communication Hill Phase 2 was going to come in at the final quarter of last fiscal year. So the way the fees are transferred from the municipality or the special district to us, they do it in the next fiscal year, so we usually get those in July. So we don't know what our final revenues are until we get the checks from the municipalities and the special districts. That's the only reason why. Expenses we pretty much know, but there's maybe a couple oddball items that wouldn't amount to much. But but on the revenue side, it truly is a guesstimate until we know what the final quarter earnings are, and we don't get a good sense of that until towards the end of July.
Thank you. It helps me understand a little bit better. So then this is a quarterly, and then the context that you just discussed, and I guess that's the part that I was kind of trying to wade through the document for, was the editorial, or as I'll refer to, the analysis point, which is, is this good? Is this bad? Is this something to be concerned about? Is this great news? For me, again, it's only just as a newbie, which is why I'm posing the question, what's the context and purpose of this document?
No, absolutely. So from the expense side, it's very good. From the revenue side, not so good. We expected revenues to be, I think, closer to 11 million on that Meadow Fair project in San Jose. Your planners did the best they could to divine when that was going to come in. It's starting to come in now, from what I understand. The grading permits have been pulled for at least the park portion of that project, and supposedly the private portion of that's coming in this fiscal year too. So that was part of our budget. Communication Hill was part of our budget. So those two projects together represented about 8 million in fees that didn't come in. So we had thought that those would be coming in. And I didn't talk about grant revenue so much, but grant revenues were very good last year. So some of the shortfall was made up by grants received.
Got it.
But those are earmarked for land acquisition, so if we don't acquire a property, can't use them.
Got it, thank you. And I think the conservation strategy implementation section was kind of the editorial component that I was looking to, that explained a little bit.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. And we'll provide some more detail on this. I had a conversation with your aide today, and we'll associate numbers with some of these major categories in the future. Make it a little easier for everyone to understand.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, if there are no more questions, that item was to be reviewed and accepted. So it is done.
Motion to accept.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes. Moving on to item 5, which is the report from the executive officer.
Yes, and I'll speed this up, just for the sake of time. So the first thing is, a couple board members requested that I sort of give an update on the RGP and the 401 process. So the in lieu fee program prospectus was submitted. It was deemed complete. There was a public comment period with the Corps. We got comments from the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Quality Control Board. They say they can't sign or certify the RGP. That's no surprise. And we also got one from the Citizens Committee to complete the refuge. I think they were possibly confused that somehow our RGP would apply to projects that were in the Bay Zone, which we don't cover projects in the plan area doesn't extend into the Bay Zone of San Jose, the county, or any of the other cities. So we're in the process of responding to their comments. We're having parallel discussions with the regional boards on trying to integrate the 401 permitting process into the regional general permit and the habitat, the HCP, NCCP component of our plan. And we've had some pretty productive meetings with them. I don't know what the final outcome's going to be and how they integrate their permit process with us. We submitted an aquatic resources plan to them back in early summer. They supposedly have their comments ready for us now to engage them. So we're looking to meet with them in November to kind of figure out what's the next steps in integrating their process with ours. We also met with NOAA Fisheries to discuss integrating fish permit with our regional general permit. So it would be sort of fast tracking the Section 7 consultations that go along with the 404 permitting of the Corps. And we get complaints from the public works departments mainly, and I'm sure the water district would echo this, is that, okay, we get the permit from you, we get the permit from the Corps, and sometimes we got to wait 9 months to get something from NOAA Fisheries. Have to wait even longer sometimes from the regional board. So that's why we're doing this, to try to integrate our fees with their process, try to cut down costs on the projects and the permits associated with those. And the big one is to reduce the time it takes to get all these permits. We had a very productive meeting with the NOAA Fisheries. As the water district knows, it's a roulette wheel, moving target with NOAA, so we don't know where it's going to go. But we met with 3 of their staff people, and 2 of them were very eager to do something with us because we can do a biological lift for fish. We can integrate fish issues in these restoration projects. I mean, right now we don't cover fish, so they got it. Some of the other staff people were a little reluctant, but we gave them an updated biological assessment. We're supposed to get comments from them back by the end of September. So Tara and Jerry are going to talk about land acquisition and they're going to talk about restoration. Land acquisition, El Toro, I'll give you lessons learned on why we didn't get the property in closed session. So Clara Park and how we can negotiate maybe a little better in the future. Clara Park Conservation Easement, this is enrolling the county park land in the reserve system as land in lieu of fees for county projects. It's moving forward. The county staff is a little concerned about some of the language of the easement. We're trying to get them comfortable about that this is a win-win, and hopefully it's something that we'll be bringing to this board soon as a major property enrollment in the reserve system. UTC Shingle Valley, we're engaging them in negotiations again. And the good thing about this is it's a brownfield site, not that that's such a great thing, but I don't think we have to worry about Chinese investors or home developers coming in and buying the property from under us. So we're also talking to the city about the regional wastewater facility staff, which I guess most of their staff are City of San Jose employees. Buffer lands, so enrollment into the reserve system, and that would be sort of to offset the regional facilities projects impacts on burrowing owls. So that's 201 acres, and it's the one success story with burrowing owls right now. So getting that land in the reserve system would be a win for us. Burrowing owls, the two sites we have management agreements are the buffer land site of the regional facility and the Warm Springs unit of Don Edwards. And the numbers are holding steady at both sites, and they're actually a significant increase in adults at both sites. Chicks, however, this year the numbers were down. There seemed to be a lot of localized flooding, and burrows were flooded. So they I guess, started the breeding season later, so there wasn't as much. The chick numbers were down, and the number of birds actually having successful brood was down. So more adults but less children. So restoration projects, I won't get into that. Tara and Jerry will be talking to you about that. So financial management update, as you know, we're transitioning away from the county as our banker and doing more stuff in-house. So we're in the process of hiring an auditing firm, and we're doing this jointly with where is the name on here? Silicon Valley Regional Interoperability Authority. Thank you. Operability, I see. I can't even read my own typing. So we're, oh, we got music, huh? So we're doing a joint RFP with them to hire audit for audit services. We're also looking at whether to have a part-time kind of a contract CFO or CPA assist with both financial services related to the 501c3, the Friends of the Habitat Agency, and the agency itself to provide sort of that financial oversight. So with the key meetings, I'll just bring a couple of them to your attention. I met a lot with legislative staff, state legislative staff, and I think it was interesting to say our outreach was instrumental in securing $53 million earmarked for NCCPs in the Park Bond SB 5, which was just passed by the legislature last week. It wasn't just us fighting to keep that money in there. There was a push by Southern California legislators to siphon it off for LA River restoration and Salton Sea restoration, but due to, I think, the efforts of our agency and others contacting our delegation, we were able to keep that money there.
Great.
So I'm meeting with Wykowski and Assemblymember Stone in November, just to let you know, just to thank them and also to keep NCCPs on their radar as an important, as we've been told, the gold standard of conservation in the state of California. So I'll leave it at that. Any questions?
Okay, there are no questions. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for that report. And then we have one governing board action, which is to approve the minutes from the June 15th meeting.
So moved.
Do we need to make a roll call because it's just for the governing board and we have one governing board member on the phone?
Board members. Tucker?
Yes.
Wasserman?
Yes.
Harney?
Yes.
Tate?
Aye.
Rocha? Aye. Semidion?
Aye.
And I'm on the governing board too, so I'll say aye.
Sorry.
Okay, that ends the governing board, and I'll ask the governing board if there's any future agenda items. Hearing none, then I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting and release Supervisor Wasserman. Or not Wasserman, you have to stay. Supervisor Semidion, thank you very much for joining us telephonically.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Take care. Signing off.
Okay, and at this time, I will now turn this over to Chair Lizotte for the implementation board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's see, on regular business, item 7, restoration completed, planned, and permit crediting. Recommended action, review and accept Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency Restoration Program update.
Yes, and Tara will be giving you a presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Tara.
Actually, I have another one. I have a couple pictures on.
I agree.
And Tara, take your time with your presentation because we're moving right along, and I think our timing is good. Board member Harney said that he had to leave by 4:30, so I think we're doing good.
I can give it with
Closed
this.
session.
Oh, we have closed session. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Larry.
I have a good mentor.
Yeah, I'll start. It's just towards the end.
There's second
More.
to the
This, I added a couple more slides, just of fun pictures from this week. So thank you, everyone. I'm Tara Donovan with the Habitat Agency. I'm the Principal Program Manager, and I'm going to give you an overview of our accomplishments of our restoration program. So we've initiated 5 projects across 7 sites in 4 different watersheds, and I'll go through each one of these items in more detail during the presentation. We've established 5 partnerships with different entities. We've had restoration credits approved by 4 different crediting agencies. We've provided benefits for 4 covered species and 3 natural communities, and then we have over 6 acres and nearly 3 miles of restoration planned or actually implemented. So here's Santa Clara County. Our first restoration project was at Clara County Park of a wetland and pond site in the Guadalupe watershed. In the Coyote watershed, we have a planned project at San Felipe Creek at Grant County Park, and then 2 pond restoration projects at Coyote Ridge. In the Baja watershed, we have a riparian restoration project at Gonzales Farm, and then at our newest reserve, the Pacheco Creek Reserve, we are planning to do a stream restoration project. All right, so we've been doing restoration since 2015. And we've had projects that are that have been constructed or in the planning phases currently. So the Clara Wetland and Pond Restoration Project was our first project that has been built, and we're currently monitoring and maintaining that project. The Gonzales Farm project has been ongoing since 2016, and that's a riparian restoration project. We have 3 projects that are currently in the planning phases: the San Felipe Creek project, Coyote Ridge, and Pacheco Creek projects. Pacheco Creek, you'll be hearing more about that today from Jerry, will go to construction in 2017, with the San Felipe Creek and Coyote Ridge projects going to construction in the spring of 2018. And then monitoring and maintenance will start with those projects in 2018 into 2019. All right. So we have our 5 restoration sites across the county. County Parks has been our partner on 2 of the projects, the project at Clara County Park and the project at Grant County Park. And also the San Jose Water Company was a partner at the Clara County Park. Thank you. At the Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve, this is owned by the Valley Open Space Authority, and they are our partner on that project as well. The Nature Conservancy and Point Blue were our partners at the Gonzales Ranch project, and that relationship with Point Blue has blossomed, and they'll be partnering with us as well at the Pacheco Creek project. The benefit of working with the Nature Conservancy and Point Blue is that they bring a lot of volunteers to our program, and they have public outreach components. And so not only are we working to improve the habitat for the species and natural communities, it also brings in school children to plant the trees and to learn about the watersheds in which they're working. All right. Back to the species, though. So two of the projects benefit the California tiger salamander and the California red-legged frog. These are the projects at Clara and Coyote Ridge. At Clara County Park, we also targeted the western pond turtle and Mount Hamilton thistle. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about how that project is going later on. The projects at Gonzales Ranch, Grant Park, and Pacheco Creek are more natural community focused. So at those sites, we're looking at more of the riparian and stream natural communities rather than the benefits to just the species. So those take a more of a natural community level focus. And at Gonzales Ranch, we're really focused on creating a wildlife corridor for animals to move safely across. Whereas at Grant Park and Pacheco Creek, we're looking at reestablishing a floodplain and stabilizing banks at both those sites. So credits. So the Habitat Agency administers three permits: the state and federal endangered species permit and the Army Corps of Engineers permits. And these three permits require restoration. For the habitat plan, we have specific ratios that we have to do for restoration. And then for the Army Corps of Engineers, we have to be ahead of impacts. With the habitat plan itself is those state and federal permits. So with the habitat plan, every acre we restore, we get the acreage credit. With the Army Corps of Engineers, they have a strange ratio system. So for every acre that we restore, we get a uniform credit, depending on the level of lift that we provide for our target natural community. So for example, we get more credits when we create something new, and we get less credits if we're just restoring or enhancing that. And so they've created a uniform scale so that there's one credit that's provided per project. And we've also negotiated with them to get preservation credits. So the area around a project can get credit as well, even if we're not doing an active project on it, if we're managing that area.
We have a question.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tara, on page 67, on the second paragraph, third paragraph, it talks about 0.05, which I read as 5/100ths, compensatory mitigation credits. And the paragraph above that, it talks about what you were just talking about, uniform mitigation and preservation credits.
So
0.18, 0.12.
Correct.
What?
What's the difference?
Well, what is, I'm not talking frequent flyer miles, I'm talking, what is 0.18, what is 0.05? I think about batting averages and it's nothing. I mean, 0.05 is 5/100ths of a point? And if we get to 100, we get what? I don't understand.
Why so small?
Well, I understand the land, that we benefit and the credits that we receive. What do we do with the credits?
We apply them to So that 5/100th is for the regional board. And they have a different standard than our other partners. And we don't have an official agreement with them, so they're really crediting project by project. So they only credited a small area of the Claro Pond project. Sorry, wetland project.
5/100ths.
5/100th of an acre. That's it.
Okay.
And the thing is, we actually weren't seeking credits from them on that project. They just provided it to us out of the kindness of their heart.
if we earn 50 credits during the year, we do what with that? That counts against our requirement that we have to, the authority has to mitigate over its lifetime? What do we redeem that?
Yeah, I'll let Tara deal with all, but with the regional board, it would be advanced mitigation credit. So if a project came in, like a county bridge project or a private developer needed credit somehow, or needed a permit from the regional board, we could use this project as advanced mitigation for their 401 permit requirements. So it would have to be 5/100ths of an acre of impact, and the regional board would have to say that this project is appropriate mitigation for the impacts of a bridge project, let's say. So it's
Okay.
it's a good thing. Yeah, I agree. It's very small.
Well,
But
it sounds,
yes,
excuse me,
yes.
through the chair. It sounds good to get credits, you know, you
Yes.
buy things on your credit card and you
Yes.
get miles. And
Yeah,
I
it's kind of like
understand that. I
frequent
just wondered
flyer.
what
Kind of
do
like
we-
frequent flyer miles, yeah.
What do we use them for?
Well, this will bank it, and when a applicant needs 401 permit, and it wouldn't be impacting, so let's say the city of San Jose or the county needed advanced mitigation permitting from the regional board, they could turn to this project and say, this project is going to mitigate for our impacts for this outfall structure in the city of San Jose. And that's about all this would be good for, is a couple outfall structures, because it's very small.
Okay,
But-
because if you add those three up, it's 0.35 of a single credit. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
based on acres. So that's a 5/100ths of an acre, so very small area. But most wetland impacts, most stream impacts are quite small. So this could cover some of the city of San Jose's outfall projects. It might cover a small bridge that the county would be working on. Might cover something small that ETA needs.
Except for the water board always goes 3-to-1 mitigation or more. So-
Right, yeah, it still would have to, yeah, so it'd have to be smaller than that, the
Hopefully our
impact.
credits don't expire.
.015.
Good.
Yeah, there's no expiration on
Good,
them.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Somebody just has to
I didn't get
remember to tell the water board that the credits are there, because
Yeah.
they forget sometimes.
Right. Yeah, they did that in a city of San Jose project I was involved with.
Okay, thank you. It's
Okay.
foreign subject to me. Thank you.
That we
Tara,
want
go ahead.
credit for something so small.
But
Yeah.
the good news is they did this, they will do this
We'll take it.
for they-
All right, moving on.
Okay. So this is going through the credits that are summarized in your memo here. So for Clara, we have these credits in hand. So we have over a half an acre of wetland and pond acre, 0.62 acres of wetland and pond credits. For regional general permit, we have uniform credits and preservation credits of 0.3 acres. And for the Regional Water Quality Control Board, we have .05. For our other three projects that are going to be implemented at the end of this year and next year, we have estimates for how much habitat plan credits we'll be getting, but we still don't know how much credit we'll get under from the Corps or from the Regional Board. So the San Felipe Creek Restoration Project at Grant County Park, the Cardi Ridge Open Space Preserve Project, and Pacheco Creek Project will provide both stream, riparian, and pond acreages for restoration, as well as the grant, as well as actual linear feet or miles of stream restoration. So the San Felipe Creek project will provide 5.5 acres of pond and wetland pond and riparian restoration, as well as nearly 2 miles of stream credits. At Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve, the pond restoration there will restore 0.39 acres of ponds, and at Pacheco Creek, we're looking at a mile of stream restoration. Okay, so what does this mean for the habitat plan? So the RGP, as I talked about, original general permit with the Army Corps of Engineers, it's you stay ahead of your impacts. And we have a 5-year permit for that. For the habitat plan, we have to complete our restoration over 40 years of our permit term. And so we're looking at, if all the required impacts occur, we have to implement a certain amount of restoration. So for sycamore alluvial woodlands, we were required to do 14 acres. And we haven't started on any of this yet because there's some uncertainties on the propagation of pure native sycamores. And right now, we and the Water District have been funding studies on how to best propagate pure native sycamores. So that's one of the reasons we've delayed on doing a sycamore project. And if you don't have sycamores that are native, you'll have to pull them out. And so we'd rather not have that cost of doing that. So for riparian woodlands, 339 acres is what we will be restoring over the permit term. And we have about 1.5 acres planned at this time. And this is part of the San Felipe Creek project. We'll likely have additional acreages as part of the Pacheco Creek project as well. For perennial wetlands, 45 acres are planned, or 45 acres are required, and we have completed or planned 0.3 acres. For ponds, we're required to restore 72 acres, and we have a little over half an acre restored or planned. For seasonal wetlands, 30 acres are required, and we have completed or restored nearly 4 acres. And for streams, this is really where our focus has been recently, because streams as well as riparian areas take the longest and the most difficult projects to complete. And so we've been focusing on these projects as our priority. So we're required to restore over 10 miles of stream over the permit term. And we are going to, with these projects I've talked about today, we'll have completed nearly 3 miles. Okay, so our completed project is the Clara County Park Pond and Wetland Restoration Project. So the wetlands started out heavily impacted by cattle, low vegetation, old infrastructure in the pond, or in the wetland. Now we have lots of green, lush vegetation. We've installed a weir that brings water from the wetland to an off-wetland trough to water the cattle. And we're already seeing successful breeding of the California tiger salamander there. At the pond, again, there was old cattle infrastructure. It was heavily degraded, heavily impacted by cattle. It wasn't holding water necessarily year-round. And today we have, again, we put in off-pond cattle troughs. We're having water flowing from the seep into the pond, and we had water up till we emptied the pond on Tuesday. So there was probably 7 feet of water still in the pond this week. So that was exciting. So at this site we're doing, we're in the maintenance and monitoring phase. So we have some kind of big maintenance this year, looking at does it look how we thought it would look? And so there was some over excavation at the pond site. I can't use a laser pointer in here, which is difficult. Oh, I can do this. So up here, there's an area that's the water's not hitting. And so we looked at how can we raise the level of the water there. And also we've had some slumping in the berm, which is dangerous because we drive on the berm. So there's a spillway on the outlet structure, so we'll be raising that about 2 inches, and that'll bring the water into that upper wetland area. And then on the berm, we're going to compact the berm and reseed it and provide additional stability there. How do I?
Trying to clear it.
There we go. And the other issue we had this year was water for cattle. It was one of the hottest summers on record, and the wetland, which we now have it was the hottest summer on record, and there's a number of construction projects happening at Clara County Park. They're putting in a staging area, they're putting in a new water tank there, and so the access for the cattle grazer is limited. And so he kept them in certain areas longer than he anticipated, and there wasn't water there. And so we have all this water down at the pond, but not at the wetland, and we have this big tank full of water. Well, the cows were at the wetland, and they were let in the wetland. And so they grazed it down, and we're working with county parks so this doesn't happen again. Looking at, doesn't look like there's major damage, but the plants are grazed down. All right, so what I care about is the species. So we have western pond turtle, tiger salamander, red-legged frog, and Mount Hamilton thistle. And so we've been monitoring for these species at both sites. And we have western pond turtle present at the pond, and we've seen young turtles there, which means they are breeding near the pond, and we hadn't seen that in the previous couple of years. Tiger salamanders are both at the pond and the wetland site. So last year, before we started the project, we found 35 larvae in the pond. Earlier this year, when we did our first round of surveys, they found like 8 larvae, and we just we emptied the pond for predator control just this week. We found over 400 tiger salamanders in the pond. So they bred a little later than we thought. They were hanging out there, and there were just a lot of them. So I had a lot of firsts. It was my first time handling a pond turtle, my first time seeing a tiger salamander, and then I saw 400 of them. It was really incredible. And we moved them to the wetland site, and we didn't have any die along the way, so we safely relocated them on site. Red-legged frogs we're still not seeing at the pond and wetland. And we've done a larger survey effort throughout Clara County Park, and we're not actually seeing them anywhere. So it might be that they aren't in the area and they can't move into the pond and wetland, or that as soon as they are, they're being eaten by bullfrogs. And the Mount Hamilton thistle, we knew it was at the pond site, but we also found one at the wetland, which is really exciting. And it's just taking off. So taking the cattle off of the pond, we're seeing a lot more vegetation production there, and the Mount Hamilton thistle is doing really well. So continued management for these species will be predator control and vegetation management. So this is one of our tiger salamanders that we found on either, I think this was from Monday.
Got that.
And we had this mud like all over us. This is just a little sample. And then this is one of our pond turtles that we found. And so I wanted to thank all of our partners from the public, private, and nonprofit sector that have been helping us implement these restoration projects. And then any questions?
Questions for Tara?
I do have a question.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In regards to the grazing, what steps have been taken so that doesn't happen again? I know
We're meeting with them in the next couple of weeks to talk about it.
so we don't have anything implemented yet that will prevent that from happening. Okay.
I think that all the staff have turned over at County Park since we started this project, and so I think it just came down to no one knew what to do, and they didn't really think it through. So.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Oh, Don, go ahead. Council member.
Thank you. I know you touched on it a little bit, but could you give me one real-life example of how we use a credit?
How we use a credit?
Yes. So, just so I get a good sense of how it's been utilized in the past.
So, every time we were, let's say I'm the water district, and I am retrofitting Anderson Dam, and there's a wetland next to the dam, and I'm impacting it.
Yes.
They're going to use a credit from our project to offset that impact.
Any project, it doesn't have to be one specific, there's no nexus, no...
There's no Like, the credits aren't assigned to your project.
Yes.
They come into a pool. And that's,
Okay.
so the nexus is if you're impacting a wetland, we have that wetland both protected and restored as part of our program.
So they can be used anywhere, generally.
Correct.
Thank you.
Then who decides who gets it? What if I have something and I want credits, and I'm Gilroy, and then the water district wants credits? Do you guys have a plan for
There's no
that?
wanting. It's just one pool. There's one pool of impacts, there's one pool of credits.
Well, let's say in some future time, we have lots of credits for something. Is there a way to administer them?
The good news with the endangered species permitting is that we collect fees, and as long as we're not falling too far behind in terms of impacts versus preservation, restoration, we just collect the fees, and it's an in lieu fee program, basically. So we don't get into that issue of what you're talking about. If a Gilroy project comes in or City of San Jose project comes in and there's no credits, because everybody understands that we'll collect money, then we'll buy property, we'll collect money, and then we'll restore or enhance. And with we're striving to get that same sort of process for the 404 permitting with the regional general permit, that we'll be able to collect money over time and then do a big project or protect lots of acres at once to avoid exactly what you were saying.
In any event, if it was the water district versus someone, it would be the water district. Now. All right. Tara, thank you very much for the
Yep, thank
informative.
you.
Anyone else, questions? No? Thank you. All right, number 8, Pacheco Creek Bank Stabilization Agreement with Point Blue Conservation Science. Recommended action, authorize the executive officer to execute an agreement. Jerry, you're going to give us a little presentation?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think aside from your approval of the minutes from the last meeting, this is your only action item. I'm happy to be bringing the action today. The request before you today is the authorization of a contract, Habitat Agency to enter a contract for restoration services on a recently acquired piece of property. So back in June, the governing board approved the acquisition of a property we're referring to as the Pacheco Creek Reserve. It's now enrolled in our reserve system, and Exhibit A is an image of the property, an aerial image of the property if you want to look at that, kind of get a sense of where it is. It's a 55-acre site, constitutes 2 parcels. It's on the south side of Highway, or State Route 152, about 3 miles east of Casa de Fruta, about 15 miles outside of Gilroy. Pacheco Creek transects the site, flowing east to west, and the site presents numerous restoration opportunities for us, but for today's request, we're just going to be focusing on bank stabilization and riparian planting. As Tara mentioned, we have worked with Point Blue Restoration Science, Conservation Science, I think it is, Conservation Science, and their STRAW program in the past. STRAW is Students and Teachers Restoring a Watershed. And let me just say that volunteer labor keeps the cost of riparian plantings pretty reasonable. The best part is getting the kids out there. These are school-grade kids, grade schoolers. And when they're out there filled with their energy and their enthusiasm, they do great work. They have small hands, so they're gentle with the plants, but they're really aggressive with the shoveling. So they do the work with unexpected zeal, I would say. And they do a pretty good job. We've seen them work out there in Gonzales Farm, and their work holds up. So if today's request is approved, we would enter a contract with Point Blue and have the STRAW program initiate a coordinated effort with 24 local classrooms, up to 12 days of planting. So we're going to get dozens and dozens of kids out there for 12 days and get an awful lot of work done with that number of people. And again, that labor is a free labor for us. Be planting anywhere between 1,000 and 1,500 shrubs and trees on the site out there. Planting would begin in November, and it would continue right on through the winter. The contract would include the procurement of the plant materials and the planting materials, the tools and whatnot, the training of the students and the teachers, supervision of the planting and irrigation, and then also 3 years of maintenance and monitoring. So for a contract that would not exceed $105,000, you're getting a big bang for the buck, I think, here.
And one thing I'd like to add, it's the kids will be coming from schools in the Gilroy and Hollister area.
Yeah, they're all local, except for my son, who's going to be coming from Aptos, and Ed's daughter, who will probably be coming from Los Gatos. They both had fun with the project out on Gonzalez Farm, so it's good to see them out there. Wholesome activity. So I have just 2 images here of the property, and these are pictures of the site here. So on your left, that's the north bank of Pacheco Creek, and that was kind of run over with the last storms we had. Denuded the bank there, kind of eroded into the channel to the banks a little bit. Here's looking downstream a little further from that same spot. What we'd like to get is to have the north bank, that on the left side, to look and function more like what you see on the right there. So the primary focus is to stabilize the banks in this reach, to create riparian habitat, and to improve the water quality out here. And the first phase of restoration is what I call just really the low-hanging fruit. We have a clear and simple objective for this project. We have a willing partner with free labor again, and we own the land, so there's no need to negotiate access or timing. We'll likely be returning in ensuing years for this property to seek your approval for more ambitious restoration projects. Those projects could include sycamore alluvial restoration, riparian pond, floodplain, or other types of restoration. But for today, the request is limited to that reach and a little bit of riparian work as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, can I have a motion?
Second?
A motion, a second, to authorize the executive officer to execute an agreement with Point Blue Conservation Science for services not to exceed $105,000. I have to tell you, I read the report, and I just think the straw program is just so fantastic. I mean, the pictures of those children are just wonderful.
And the smiles on their faces
Yeah.
tell it all. They're happy to be out there. And let's be honest, they're skipping a day of school.
Yeah. That's all right. That's all right.
Good mix.
They're getting in their public service, public service credits. So
Right,
there. Do we have a motion and a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed or abstain? That motion carries. Thank you, Jerry, very much. I'm sorry, what was that?
Tucker?
Tucker and
second.
Keegan.
I was second, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.
The next item is 9, approval of the minutes of the May 18th regular meeting of the Implementation Board. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Been moved. Do we have a second? Moved and seconded, moved by Wasserman, seconded by Rocha and/or Tucker. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One abstention. Director Keegan. All right. Future Implementation Board initiated agenda items. Are there any agenda items anyone wants to initiate? Seeing none, we will move into closed session, and after that, we will reconvene to adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
I'll open it to public comment.
And we can do the El Toro one next meeting if you guys need to
No,
run.
I think we're
Okay.
good. I think we're good.
Okay.
You know, Daniel has to leave at 4:30, so I think that should give us plenty of time. Before we go into closed session, why don't we do the opportunity for public comment? Is there any public comment? Doug? No? Walt, you already gave yours? My husband, no? Okay, we're going to go into closed session then.
When did he sneak in?
Reconvening the Implementation Board, we'll ask our council to report out, and then we'll be adjourned.
Yes, so the Implementation Board met with regard to the executive officer compensation, just to provide some direction based upon the earlier public discussion, and with regard to the conference with real property negotiator, there was just a discussion of lessons learned, no action taken.